Good afternoon. With me today, Debbie Hicks. She got quite a story to tell. Um, One of the things I was doing from the beginning, I was live streaming the events to show what is really going on, and then next objective of mine was to fight the bullying, and I passionately hate people being bullied, and all this. Campaign by mainstream media calling people, labeling them anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorists, while in fact we just had their mothers, mothers, grandmothers, fathers who were first time protesting. It doesn't meet this criteria, so I passionately hate bullying, and Debbie, she's been bullied a lot since the beginning of this horrible scenario. That's her story. So, Debbie, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, Raj. If I can call you Raj, is that okay? I don't know.
Yes, that's
Thank you so
fine.
much for inviting me on. Yeah, my name's Debbie Hicks. You've probably heard of me because I'm all over the newspapers this week, unfortunately, because I've just had my verdict. I've been on trial. I've been on trial for several things, but I've been on trial for filming an empty hospital in December 2020. And the press have made a meal out of that. They really have, with a smear campaign over the last year. And yesterday I was convicted of a public order offence for filming an empty hospital. So yeah. What else can I say? For the last 2 years, like you, Rad, I've been constantly doing everything I can. Organising actions, trying to get groups together, trying to assemble people, and because I just feel that there's nothing else now. This is, if we don't do anything, we have no future. So this is why I've become an activist in this movement. So,
if you can talk us through what actually happened through whole chronology, because you were arrested and subsequently bullied by the police. It didn't just happen overnight. The situation built up quite dramatically. If you can talk us through your history.
yeah, in filming the hospital, because I have been arrested several
Yes.
times now. Yeah, what happened is, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was the 27th, maybe the 28th of December 2020. It was quite a spontaneous thing. I'm a spontaneous person. I don't always plan ahead. I was at home. I decided to give myself a week off for Christmas. I thought I needed a break from all the activism. And I'm the kind of person, if I'm not doing something, I start getting restless. And I was reading all the reports. I don't know if you remember, Rad, all the reports were coming in that the hospitals were overflowing.
Overwhelmed.
That, it like a war scene in the hospitals. They couldn't handle it, so that they couldn't have anybody coming in, and they cancelled all NHS treatments, operations. And I was hearing from people locally that the hospital was empty. My husband was one of those people. He had to go in for an outpatient's appointment. He did manage to get one. And the staff there told him they've got nothing to do, that they were bored, they were fed up because the hospital was so quiet. Other people said the same to me. And other people have been into ICU and said there's nobody there. So I thought, right, I want to see what's going on. I just knew instinctively that the hospital was going to be empty. And but I just wanted to document it. So I thought, I'm going to take a walk around. So I decided to go to Gloucester Hospital, because it's the nearest one to me. That's a big hospital, where they were reporting that it was packed to the rafters. And if you've seen the footage, which I'm sure you all did, because it just went everywhere, didn't it, that footage? The hospital was so quiet. It was an absolute shock. It felt like, those films you watch, those dystopian films where, I can't remember, the one that's about London, where it's all completely like nobody there, like there's been a kind of a apocalypse or something. That's what it felt like. It's like we're living in an apocalypse. So I walked around, and I think that's why the video was shared so much. You could hear my shoes because it was so quiet walking around. And that was it. I went home, and it went it went viral, it went everywhere. And I got lots of questions back saying, well, hold on, Debbie, you only filmed the main corridors. What about the block? Because there's a block with the wards in, and supposedly the wards with the COVID wards, the disease wards. A couple of days later, I thought, well, I'll take another walk just around by the block. So I went back about a day later, and I walked up through the wards with my through the main public corridors of the wards, not into the wards, just to see if they were busy. And it was exactly the same. There was just a few staff dotted around. There was no patients, no members of the public at all. And on that occasion, there was a group of staff that came out of one of the doors, and I moved away to stay away from them. And then they stopped on the stairs because I think they were suspicious of me because I had my phone with me. And in the end, I thought it's time to go now because they're getting suspicious. And I wasn't there to sort of film staff or talk to staff. I wasn't there to do that. They stopped on the stairs, and as I left, they questioned me on the stairs about why I was filming, and they said, you shouldn't be filming. It's a breach of confidentiality. You need to go. So I just questioned it. I said, the hospital's empty. People are being denied essential healthcare in this country. The public have a right to know what's going on. And they said, again, you shouldn't be filming. And I responded and I said, we pay with our taxes for the hospitals, we pay for the NHS, people have a right to know. And at that point she said, right, you need to go, otherwise we're going to call security. I think she said something like that. And then I left, and that was it. That was it. There was no, I didn't call them any names. I didn't say anything abusive. And this is what they've used to say that I committed an offence. They said that I verbally assaulted them, that I said things that were aggressive, that made them uncomfortable and unhappy. And I was convicted yesterday of that offence. And that offence is called a Section 5 Public Order Act, in using threatening words or behaviour. So, yeah. Mad, isn't it? Absolute madness.
I still got memory of you being at home and police harassing you about midnight time.
Yeah. So what happened is 2 days later, because that went all over the place, it went viral, it went all over the world. There was a big kind of thing about it. On social media. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. It was quite late in the evening, and I was in bed because I'd had a late night the day before. I was in bed, and I wasn't dressed. And my husband answered the door, and I just knew. I thought, oh, it's the police. It's about this. And he came upstairs and he said to me, "Police at the door. They want to speak to you." And I said, "Well, I'm not dressed. Tell them if they really want to speak to me, I'll come down to the station." He came back and said, no, they're refusing to go. They want to speak to you here and now. So I was really, I'm sure you could see that in the video, I was really angry that they wouldn't leave my home at Christmas and I wasn't dressed. So I put my dressing gown on, came out of the bedroom door, and one of them shot up the stairs, slapped the handcuffs on, and said, "You're under arrest," the thing that they say to you. And I had to then demand, as did my husband, which is when I said switch the camera on, and he filmed it. I had to then demand that they let me get dressed, let me go back in my room to get dressed before they took me into custody. And he gave me 2 minutes to get dressed outside my bedroom door. And when I came back out, hands were put behind my back, and I was taken into custody. So, and that was, I think I should go into detail actually, because I've been careful to do that until now because of the trial. But that was a complete abuse, what happened to me in custody as well. It was absolutely horrific. They, when I arrived in custody, I was held for an hour in a holding bay, which is what they do for like really serious criminals, like people that are dangerous. They held me in there with my hands cuffed behind my back for an hour. And because I've got quite poor circulation with my hands, my hands started to swell and go blue, and I kept saying, "Take off the cuffs, please," and they wouldn't. So naturally, I was quite wound up. I think that was the purpose, trying to wind me up. So when I came out, and it's like a check-in you have to go through. You go to a custody desk, and there's a check-in process where they take all your details. And at this point, they told me they were going to bring in a responsible adult to assist me in custody. And I wasn't quite clear what that was about at that point. But then later on, they took me out of my cell and they said, we've got to take your DNA. And I said, I'm sorry, you're not taking my DNA. I don't consent to that. They said, you have no choice. And I said, well, what happens if I say no? They said, we'll hold you down and force you to do it. So Rad, in that situation, I didn't want to have to go through that. So I had to give in, and they took my DNA. And at that point, this woman was brought into the room when they do all the, the mug shots and all the rest of it. This woman was brought into the room, and it was announced that I have to have a responsible adult with me who's going to accompany me into my police interview. And it was at that point I realized that they were trying to paint me as mentally ill. So anyway, later on in the evening, they wanted to do the police interview. And I said, you can go ahead with an interview, but it's going to be no comment from me. I'm not going to say anything until I have a proper lawyer or solicitor with me. And they said, well, you can have the duty solicitor. I said, no, I'm not using your duty solicitor. I said, I want my own solicitor. And they said, well, we'll phone them for you. Who do you want to use? So I suggested somebody in London. I can't remember who it was now. And they come back and they said, oh, no, that person won't represent you. And then I suggested another person, and they come back and they said the same again. They said, that person's refusing to represent you. And I thought, this is really strange, because one of these solicitors had helped me before. And I just thought it was really bizarre. It was almost like they were forcing me to try and use the duty solicitor. So I said, well, that's it then. I said, if you do the interview, unless I can arrange for a solicitor and you give me like a laptop or my phone, it will be no comment. So we went ahead, we did the police interview. I stuck by my guns. I said, I had this woman in the room as well. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm not happy to do an interview with her in here either, because that's not appropriate. This woman, I didn't even know who she was, and she's trying to answer for me in the room. So this was making me feel, and I had to hold that back, this was making me feel really angry. And in the end, they said, we're going to terminate this interview. And they let me go about an hour later and put me on bail to return to do the interview two weeks later with a solicitor, so that I could arrange for a solicitor. But the other thing that I found out, Rad, when I finally got home after that whole ordeal, my husband was waiting outside in the car park for me, outside the police station with my son, with my 14-year-old son. Apparently, the custody officer went out to the car park, knocked on the window and said to my husband, your wife, in front of my son, your wife is mentally ill. You need to sign her bail papers for you. And luckily, he refused to do it. Now, and I think that's what upset me the most, is that they went up to my family and said things like that to them that were not true. And so the whole, in reflection, looking back, the whole process felt like a psychological, trying to wear me down psychologically, trying to break me. But it didn't work. I got through it, and in the end got a really, really good solicitor and made my way through. Yeah.
So will you appeal? Is this final judgment, or you will appeal against this, or what?
I'm going to appeal. I am going to appeal, Rad, because it's the verdict of being guilty for using threatening words and behaviour is simply not true, because I didn't do that at all. I'm sure you've gathered by now with the stuff I do. I'm a very assertive person, and I might come over to someone that doesn't know me as assertive. And certainly when those women questioned me on the stairs, I responded quite assertively. But to be told that I threatened them with words, for it to be convicted of that, using threatening words and behaviour, I found it so insulting. And I'm sorry, it's a lie. It is a lie. I'm going to say that. And I don't know what's going on with those NHS staff to stand up in a court and make those kind of statements about me. Although if we get the transcripts, perhaps I can share them with you. You'll see from the transcripts that they even, under cross-examination, admitted that I didn't actually abuse them. They just used words like, oh, we didn't like her demeanor. We didn't like her approach. There was nothing I actually said that was threatening. But yeah, I don't know what was going on. I mean, there's questions about if the NHS Trust has played a role in this, the hospitals, because according to my barrister who represented me in court, the head of the trust had made a complaint to, I think, the CPS to try and get me convicted. So this, as you know, this is all coming from, the whole conviction is coming from above. And I have questions about that verdict from the judge in terms of what happened before that verdict was reached, because we had the trial 2 weeks before the verdict, and he had 2 weeks to go away and reach his verdict when it should have been done in court on that day. So what happened? Who did he speak to? Was he looking at the newspapers? Was this trial by media, which I think it is? So yeah. So I will. I'm going to appeal. I'm going to take it to the High Court. I've just set up a crowd fund. It's going to hopefully go live today on Crowd Justice. So anyone that's listening, if you type my name into Crowd Justice, there's going to be a crowd fund, and hopefully, I can't promise anything, we'll have a much fairer response on appeal, because these points of law that were presented were completely, human rights law case law was completely ignored by the judge. Right.
You're the second person who had been trialed that I interview. I interviewed Kieran Stevenson a couple of months back, but he was kind of dragged into the game. Yeah, so he admitted the fault. I mean, admitted the charges, which I think also he was pressurized into, rather than it was the statement of facts. There was many more instances of people filming hospitals. I haven't been filming hospitals myself, but I've been filming empty testing centers. So
it's similar in a way, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, whatever we were fed in the mainstream media didn't really match the reality, and now we see slowly. I call this semi-mainstream, soft mainstream, GBC News, Talk Radio, who pretend to still be media that question, but they don't question narrative. I would say they never really do. They only admit things after the cat is really out of bag. Then they are admitting it. But BBC is doing complete state propaganda. So now they admitted at GBC channel that real amount of people who died from most famous disease is in the range of just slightly over 7,000 over 2 years period. So it doesn't seem like a bubonic plague, and all the measures that we're used to, we will have to go back through this. I'm a bit concerned. And one of the other reasons I wanted to talk with you was influence on the London election, because you were involved in this. You were helping one of candidates.
Yeah.
I know at least two candidates. I've met them in person during freedom rallies, and I'm familiar with third gentleman. So that was David Curtin, Pierce Corbyn, and I never met Brian Rose, but I was familiar with him because of his YouTube channel, and I know that three of them confirmed that they weren't allowed to run their campaign, and that's something which is obviously is a separate subject. So I think this is completely unethical, undemocratical, against all the procedures, and I wouldn't be shying away from calling this an election fraud.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
what what's your view on this being involved in
Absolutely. I completely
campaign?
agree. I picked, there were so many things. I'm trying to cast my memory back now, earlier last year. There were so many things that were a breach of human rights law, actually. All of this has been, as we know, in terms of being able to have a free election, because it wasn't a free election in any way. We weren't allowed to campaign. Although, I mean, Peers, as you know, I worked as Peers campaign manager, and I set up the Let London Live party with the Electoral Commission for Peers, and did all the, all the paperwork and stuff with that. And I'm trying to think, I think it was probably February time, we decided to start going out and campaigning, which is not unusual in an election that you start that period of time. I mean, often it's earlier than that, but we started in February for the May election, and we wanted to go out and leaflet. We wanted to go out and talk to the public, have rallies. The usual thing that you do to engage with the public, and we didn't know what to do. So we just continued. There was no advice that came from government, that came from the Cabinet Office that was supposed to be dealing with it. And there was nothing from the London Authority either. I kept phoning them up. So we thought, well, we would just continue. And obviously, we started getting arrested. I'm sure you've seen those arrests. Piers was arrested. I was arrested, and I'm still facing a court trial for being arrested while out campaigning for Piers, when I was actually collecting nomination signatures for his, because you have to do that. That was another thing. You have to run for mayor, you have to get signatures from each borough of London. Now, they did change it, because it used to be that you had to have 33 signatures from each borough, but they changed it to 2 from each borough of London, and that's for 33 boroughs of London. Yes, 33, isn't it? So we had to go. So it didn't sound so bad, but it was still really, really hard, because there was nobody in the offices, in the council offices, to go and speak to.
Excuse me, can I ask you what type of signature? So any person living in the borough, or
yeah, people have to live in that
just
borough.
a member of the public living under the particular borough postcode?
Yeah, they have to live in that borough and be registered to vote on the electoral register. And
Right.
so that was the challenge. So we had teams of people, amazing, amazing people that worked so hard, that would go out and get all those signatures. And then we had to check they were on the electoral roll. And because we didn't have access to the electoral roll either, because we were still waiting for our verification of our new party, we had to keep phoning all the council offices in all around London to chase these signatures. So we had this horrible process. We did it by the skin of our teeth. We did it by the skin of our teeth, by the deadline, and we got all the nomination papers in. But while doing that, I was arrested. I was arrested for collecting signatures. And you couldn't do it online. You had to do it in person. So that was one complete breach of electoral law and process.
It's just making it impossible, technically impossible, for candidates to go through normal process.
Yeah. So that was set up so that you would fail. And all the candidates we spoke to, not just the anti-lockdown candidates, but other candidates that I spoke to, said the same, that it had been set up in a way to try and stop people becoming candidates for London Mayor. Everybody, I think even the Green candidate, I've forgotten her name, Sean Berry, I think her name was. I had a conversation with her, and even she said that to me. So that was across the board. Everybody noticed how it had been set up in that way. We were also given less time than usual to officially campaign. They announce an official date. They call it the campaign proper, is what they call it in political language. That was a reduced time from normal as well. We kept being hounded by the police wherever we go. I remember going up to Islington High Street to hand out leaflets with another lady, and the police were trying to move us on. They were trying to arrest us, so we just had to keep walking all the way up and down the High Street, with hoods up, like and shopping trolleys, making out we're doing our shopping so that we wouldn't get arrested, so we could give out leaflets. It was absolutely insane. And I want to say, Rad, on that point, it really makes me angry because at that time, Sadiq Khan, we heard, was holding events in, I think, in a cafe. Did you remember hearing about this? He held an event in a cafe in North London somewhere. And I don't know, there was some sort of protest outside, something going on in that area of London, I don't know, to do with shops or something. And it was all over the media. But there was no question about why is he allowed to go and campaign? He was allowed to go and do it, but we weren't. The anti-lockdown candidates were not allowed to go out, because I think even Brian Rose was pulled up, wasn't he, with his bus? Do you remember that? He was on his
Yes,
bus.
yes.
So
I
there was
remember. I remember very clearly David Curtin questioning Sadiq Khan in that regard, because he allowed other movements to protest, like Black Lives Matter, uh, but didn't was completely heavy handling the all the anti-lockdown freedom protests. So what was the difference between certain groups being able to protest? I even remember, and again, this is aside of any political sympathies, ideologies. This just shouldn't happen, regardless of each person's political views.
yeah,
The whole mechanism of election was rigged,
yeah,
and that's my concern. We are now in a situation of this so-called Partygate, but then I think this situation with London election should be also reviewed,
yeah,
and they should be consequences of that. I remember filming on the day one of many protests, but we had two protests going on the same time. Um, Actually, three. There was Julian Assange, there was
yeah,
protests of Indian farmers, and there was a freedom rally. And I remember heavy handling of the freedom rally,
yeah,
while farmers and Julian Assange protests were allowed to happen. Yeah. So what
yeah.
was the difference between gathering of groups and actually, I could even say that police was quite supportive to the other groups,
Yeah.
which also shouldn't happen.
No. No, no, absolutely. We've seen that throughout the lockdown, haven't we? Throughout the last 2 years, is that you've had protests from BLM, Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, left alone. I've witnessed it myself. I was stood in Downing Street and I watched them march past, and they were left completely alone. And then we get together, as you know, and we're always peaceful for the most part, aren't we? Most of us, and being completely attacked. I've seen friends of mine being beaten to the ground. I've seen women being beaten to the ground. It's been absolutely horrific. And there's no mistake when we say that these are orders that are coming from high up in the Met to treat us differently to other protesters. So it certainly isn't about lockdown regulations. This is politics. It's Orwellian politics. It's the politics about from your country, where people are treated differently, that are standing up to the system. So
Can you
yeah,
can you confirm that you were targeted as individual? I've came across situation when in one of December protests, when the numbers were going down, and actually numbers were going down, and they were really heavy handling the protests. Um, I I've been approached like individually, so they knew my name, they knew who I was. I said
yeah,
that I'm a press, I'm filming here.
yeah,
No, we told you not to come. We spoke with you 2 weeks ago. So literally, they had a profile. They knew people by names. Can you confirm that? Were you
yeah,
targeted? Did you
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like if you are in a crowd of, let's say, 500, 300, were they going after you in first instance?
Yes, I do feel, especially after the press that I've had and the hate campaign, the witch hunt in the press. I do think I'm targeted. The evidence I have from that is recently, actually, I say recently, a few months ago. I was in London. It was quite a small gathering, and I was with Piers Corbyn, and we were making our way up to the Department of Health on Victoria Street, and we were going to do something outside, and there was a group of police walking along. They were trying to be quite friendly, which I never trust them when they're trying to be friendly, to be honest. But one of them, and I had seen him before, it was a black police officer, come up, was being all friendly to me. And on this occasion, I didn't have my son with me because I often take my teenage son often comes with me because he's very interested in what we do and he supports. And he came up to me and he said, "Oh, hello, Debbie," he said. And I'm like, what? You know, I've never spoken to this guy before. He said, "Where's your son today?" And I was so taken aback. It was like, whoa, you know who I am? You know, I bring my son with me on protest. You're watching what I do. And I was really angry. I said, "How dare you?" I can be quite fiery. I turned around and said, "How dare you bring my son, talk about my son to me when you don't even know me? How do you know my name?" And he just walked away then. And that's when it hit me that they're obviously, before any gathering in London, particularly with us, I think they're going through profiles of people to look out for. They've got pictures. I've been told this by people that work with the police. They go through pictures of known activists and say, "Well, look out for such and such. Look out for," we know Piers is on that list, obviously. Look out. So I'm clearly, and I know that now, and I'm clearly on that list, Rad. And the other thing, what happened to me is after all that happened with the hospital last year, December 2020, in January, I had a series of incidents with the police keep knocking at my door where I live, which I found really uncomfortable. I didn't like it at all. It made me quite angry. And on the one occasion, we did answer the door. We've got bolts on our door now. We've had to do that because of what happened to me. They wanted to know, they wanted to ask questions about my movements, where I was going, what I was doing. And I just shut the door and said, "If you want to speak to me about anything, I'm happy to come down to the station with a solicitor." "Oh, no. They were just fishing. I think they were just fishing to find out what I was up to." So that's stopped now. But on that basis, I think I'm probably being monitored by Gloucestershire Police where I live and the Met in London with that happened in London. So yeah, I think they know who we are, don't they? They're monitoring us. Yeah.
I had the exactly same feeling, like that they approached me and they knew who I am, and that they were clearly targeting me out of the crowd.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing something which was allowed by the regulation, which was journalist job. And the same, obviously, bullying, which is not appropriate because technically they shouldn't do. I had instances where twice they issued me with fine. I never received those fines. I had the camera confiscated, or I was stopped, and literally they didn't follow the regulation. But obviously that's just a minor inconvenience. But what we're discussing is like what they've done to you is very serious bullying, in my opinion, and not justified. And then this situation with the election, which you were involved and you got first hand experience, that's I would say this is serious crime. This is rigging of the election, hijacking the
It was
democratic
rigged. I
procedure.
mean, it was rigged on lots of levels. When we talk about rigging, I think people just think it means the vote's fixed, but it means in every way it's fixed. I mean, the other thing, which I don't know if you're aware of, if David Curtin talked to you or if you talked to Piers, was when we arrived at the count, they had three, I think, counting halls in London. They had Alexandra Palace, Excel, the Excel Centre in East London and on the docks, and the Olympia Centre. And when I arrived, I nearly went mad at the sight of it was something out of like a George Orwell book or something. It was, I've got a photo, but I never shared it with anyone because you're not supposed to but it was Perspex. So obviously I can't put that anywhere. You're not supposed to do that. Perspex screens encasing the whole of the count, where the staff are counting the papers. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well. That were about 7 foot high, very, very high, and you couldn't get past them. And when just the sight of it, I just knew. I thought, oh my god, this is just to stop us, shut us out, so we can't see, what they're doing. And I was so distressed actually, that I phoned, because I had the phone numbers for the count managers that had been sent to me. I phoned them up and I called them over, and they said, oh, they come out with all the disease, all the disease stuff. We've got to have these screens up because of the disease. But it later transpired to be a problem, because we had people that were working for peers that were there to monitor the count. And what they were doing is, because they do it all on computers as well as now, RAD, which is another thing that's a big problem. When the papers arrive from the ballot boxes, they get scanned through a machine that counts them. And I went over, I wanted to watch what was going on. And when I questioned the member of staff, I said, well, how does this work? And how do we know it's reliable? And how do we know that it can't be tampered with? And she didn't even seem to know. She said, well, I just load them on, she said, onto this. It's like almost like a weighing machine. I just load them on, and the computer and the scales work out how many papers are on there, and then it goes through a machine. So it's scanned onto a computer screen for them to tally the votes. So I was really concerned, because I thought, well, if a machine is set, I'm not a computer expert, this is common sense to me. If a computer is set to calculate how many ballot papers are going into a scale, a human being has to set that algorithm, don't they, on the computer? Who's doing that? And what methods are they using? And when I asked this, oh, we don't know. I mean, they don't. To be fair, they didn't know. They're just doing a job. I mean, they didn't know. But that highlighted me a huge area where it's open to mass corruption. The other thing is, once they'd all been scanned onto the screen, and you've got the electoral staff there looking, and they're doing it very quickly on a screen, it's flashing past like this. They're looking at all the ballot papers. And what you can do is, they've got like a double screen on the other side behind the perspex, the plastic, where you can see what they're doing. So the screen is shared, is tallying them up, the cross boxes, in terms of first, second, third choice votes for the candidates. And then it passes on to the next paper. And on lots of occasions, we all picked up on the members of staff making mistakes, which is fine, Rad. That happens in elections. I've worked on elections for years, and normally it's done in front of you on a piece of paper. You can stop someone and it will be amended. But what we were doing is, we were having to smack on the glass. And by the time, and they would get annoyed then, like we were harassing them, and the managers would get annoyed with us because we were trying to intercept. And by the time they finally came round to speak to us, they'd go back to the computer and say, well, the computer only allows us to go back one ballot paper. So the mistake had occurred, and nothing could be done about it. And this was happening all the time, and not just to peers' papers. I mean, it happened to peers. It was happening to other candidates as well. And we saw all sorts of weird stuff as well on ballot papers, which was really like funny symbols and all sorts of stuff. So the whole thing was it was a scam, in my opinion. I mean, there was no scrutiny. We couldn't scrutinize any of it at all. No.
Talking about scrutiny, do you remember results and frequency? Was that announced, or you can't recall?
The final result was announced. They stopped counting on the Saturday. I'm trying to remember the dates now, and then the result was announced at City Hall on the Sunday. So between that period of time, none of the candidates were informed of the result until they arrived at City Hall on, I think it was, 11 o'clock midnight on the Sunday. And to me, again, Rad, that's not the way you do an election. It should be the count is done in front of you, and the result is announced straight after that result. So to me, there's a period of time between the count and the announcement. You have all sorts of room for corruption there, don't you? All of it was just absolutely.
Just from start to finish, I would say just from start, because I didn't have information that you're telling me now. But just seeing this, that candidates were not allowed to go into contests, that's just throws the whole idea of democracy through the window.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So
And
this is
also, when
just
you look at it logically, the whole argument they make about using computers is that it's quick and that it's efficient. It saves time because it's all these huge votes for London. They can't deal with it. That's the argument they make. They can't do it practically. I mean, and that's a lie anyway, because they used to do it. So why can't they do it now? They used to do it all on paper in London. But that's the argument they make. So on that basis, is it's so efficient. Why couldn't the result have been announced as soon as they had it? Why do we have to wait? It doesn't make sense, does it? Why do we have to wait to the next day to get the results? And I don't think they can make the argument, oh, it's too late at night, the staff are tired, they've got to go home. Because in an election, that's how it works. If it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you stand there and you get your result. That's an
Mhm.
election, isn't it? As we know, that's how it works. That's how it used to work. So, yeah, the whole thing. I mean, we did, we did make a complaint. Obviously, it didn't go anywhere. We made a complaint to the Cabinet Office and we got the usual nonsense letter back, not really saying anything. Well, we did try to ask for a review at the High Court, and that was refused as well. So, yeah, we were hoping the other candidates would do that, but I don't think they did. So.
what you make of current situation, because we seems that situation seems to be relaxing in light, I would say, of Garden Party and Partygate, so-called Partygate, when
Mm,
we finally see members of the public being outraged with the actions of government.
mm.
But it just came to this particular moment, and I think maybe this is first time when they see that the polls are going down, and maybe this is just like their desperate attempt to um, rescue their position. What you make of this current situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we're all talking about this at the moment. What's really going on? Um, I think there is genuinely a crisis in the Conservative Party um, and the government in terms of how to deal with this situation. I think there's a contingent, as we've seen with the rebellion over COVID, over the health passports. Um, I think there's a genuine rebellion amongst those MPs that are unhappy. I also think there's a contingent that are controlled, as all prime ministers are, by the New World Order, by World Economic Forum, whatever you want to call them, these people that are in control of all this. And I think there is a battle that's been going on within government and with the Conservative Party. So I think all this with the leaks about parties as part of that battle. I think Dominic Cummings is coming out in all of this. And I think from what I've learned, there's a lot of politics between him and Boris Johnson's wife in terms of who controls Boris. I think that's so there's internal politics going on. But I also think it was what we have to do. We have to step back sometimes and look at the bigger picture. What is this all about? Why all of a sudden does the mass media want us to know that they were having parties? Because obviously the people in the media would have known about that. I mean, that was, I don't know, a
Of
year ago.
course, and a
Yeah,
certain footage, let's say footage of Matt Hancock
yeah,
approaching his aide. Like, why
yeah,
would there be camera there in first place? Why
yeah,
would that be
yeah,
smuggled to the press? I think like that Boris is being evacuated in a safe place,
yeah,
so he won't face the prosecution. He will land in a soft cushion manner, same like Matt Hancock.
yeah.
That's my guess about what's going on.
Mm,
But there's another thing I wanted to discuss with you, because there seems to be no alternative. Like,
mm,
to be honest, before beginning of this scamdemic, I will not be afraid to refer to this as a scamdemic.
mm-hmm.
After 19 years of being immersed into this and pretty much spending uh, several hours of my life every single day digging into it, I I can concur this is scamdemic, not
Yeah,
the
completely
bubonic plague act of nature. The way it was handled leaves me no illusion.
agree. Hmm.
There seems to be no. I wasn't interested in politics. That's what I'm saying. Um, I I was just keeping my head down. I was working, doing my little things, and then when this situation came, I was involved. I mean, there was a big debate around Brexit, and I happen to be Polish, and I was thinking at the beginning that this is a. I just felt that this is like personal attack. I felt that this is like a bit of
Mhm.
a racist issue.
Yeah.
I had this immature view of the situation. What when I engage in debate, I actually I've taken the arguments of pro-Brexit side, and I thought, yeah, that's okay. That's why we've got democracy. People will vote things in and out,
Yeah.
and I felt like, okay, if people choose that this is the best outcome for them, why
Yeah.
not? Admitted. I thought this would be something which potentially affect my position, but I admitted the arguments of pro-Brexit uh, people, and I respected this. I thought
Yeah.
it wasn't in my best interest, or but I felt like this is first time when I'm like, as an adult person, I'm engaging into democratic process in action.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember fierce debate, and there was actual debate, and it
Hmm.
was allowed. I thought we know that
Yeah.
there was a lots of manipulation by media, but there was debate.
There was
But
debate.
with
Yeah.
all this situation, we just had a Chinese or North Korean style suppression of free speech, censorship, complete propaganda,
Hmm.
abuse by any means and forms of force that government can enroll.
Hmm.
And now this is like first time is why I see you as a seasoned activist. You've been involved in activism before this situation,
Yeah.
from what I've watched in your videos,
Yeah.
and now I'm just thinking about alternative, because like meeting people like Dave Curtin, Pierce Corbyn,
Yeah.
I just first started seeing through big lies we are surrounded with, and it's maybe
Mhm.
first time when I saw somebody trying to get into politics and
Yeah.
do something about this. This was the same like I've met Vincent Dulmal. He was involved in Save Our Rights. I didn't have a chance to interview his partner, uh, but Louis Cresfield. But
Louise. Yeah.
Louis, yeah, but
Yeah.
I will reach to her as well. But I was discussing with people like what's the way forward? How can we now come out of this? What alternative can we build? But I was first shocked that there is no real alternative, because conservatives and so-called labor, they didn't different. There was no difference between their uh, way of handling things, except of maybe more harsh way of
Yeah.
handling from.
Yeah.
So what sorts of opposition is that? Where is the
Mhm.
debate? Where is difference of opinion? And the only difference was from independent people like peers who
Yeah.
weren't shy to quote the science, and stand up, go out on the street with megaphone, etc. So to summarize this, like, what do you see as the future? Where we heading? What can we do? Because like, to repeat the same thing and expect different results is definition of a madness by Einstein.
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
What can we do? What do you see happening in with the
Yeah.
democracy, with the system? What can we do? What's your view on this?
Yeah. No, that's a really really good question that we need to discuss a lot more. What do we do? I have to say, as soon as this all started 2 years ago, it was the first thing that entered my head. Where's this going to end up, and what do we do? Because we know there is no democracy anymore, whatever there was of democracy. And there was some principles, as you said, wasn't there? Even though that's been, in my opinion, been a long road to reach this point. We've been on that road a long time. It's just that it reached that totalitarian control point. Um, and when every level, as you've pointed out really well, has been corrupted, every area level of politics has been corrupted in this country, and it has. Parliament, local councils. I mean, local councils are businesses now. They're not democratic institutions. I mean, all local councils under Agenda 21 principles had to become what they call self-sustaining councils. If you look into this, they've all got it on their websites now. They claim it's about balancing the books, but actually it's about making sure that they raise money privately to run, from corporations to run their essential services. So they're corrupted. MPs are corrupted. European Parliament's corrupted. We talk about that. I know, no matter what your position was on leaving and staying in the EU, that's corrupt as well. So it begs the question, doesn't it? If it's all corrupt and we've got no proper opposition because they're part of it as well, what do we do? We've got no voice, have we? It's and the alternative, which is what they're going to present to us very soon, and this is where we have to be really careful. The alternative, we're moving towards a collapse. That's what we're moving towards, a collapse of the whole system. And if you read all the literature from the World Economic Forum, that collapse is engineered. As we know, collapses don't just happen, they're engineered. Political collapses, economic collapses, stock market crashes, and we're moving towards that very quickly. It could be this year. If you look at market reports, it looks like it could be this year. And in that situation, we're left with a choice, aren't we? As people, as we, the 99%, are left with a choice. What do we do? Do we let them take control and offer us a new system, or do we take control and create a new one? Because this system that we're talking about is not going to go on much longer anyway, Rad. It's really not. It's final days, I think it really is, which is why we're seeing this absolute. I don't think it's just theatre for the media either. I think it's just the absolute madness, isn't it, that we're seeing this meltdown in every way of the mad things that they're all doing. And I think that's why it's when you look at things through history, when we were getting towards collapse, it was like madness in the final days, wasn't there? Everything goes a bit crazy. So I think in that situation, we need to we as a movement need to start talking about, well, what system, if we can take control, and we have to try and do that, and it's going to be hard, what kind of system do we want? Because the system that they want to bring in, which they're going to call direct democracy, and it's a complete lie, is going to be all online. We've already talked about that. We've been moving to this system already. They want all elections to be online, all voting. They want to introduce something called citizens' assemblies. Now, the World Economic Forum, this comes from them. This is their idea. And if you look into what Extinction Rebellion are pushing at the moment, this is what they're pushing. It's for citizens' assemblies. Now, on the surface, that sounds really good, doesn't it? Oh, that's really good. Citizens' assembly, people making decisions. But when you look into it, what they want to do is they want to select people at random on a computer. We've heard this before, haven't we? About computers and algorithms. They want to select people at random on a computer to go onto an online citizens' assembly. And these are going to be people that are going to supposedly represent all of us and all our needs and preferences and what we think. Now, there's two problems you've got with that. The first problem is, do we trust computer systems and the people that control them in terms of who they're selecting? Do we know these are going to be real people on a screen? We know, you know probably much more than me about how the technology they can use and how they can present things on a screen. The second issue I've got is, call me old-fashioned, I still believe in representative democracy. I want to know that there's going to be someone that's going to be answerable to me. So if I've got an issue locally, I don't know, I've got an issue with the bus or the school, or I don't know what's going on
you can knock to the door.
Knock on the door and say, hello, I want to talk to you, or we want to come and talk to you if you're a group of people, in that democratic fashion, and hold them to account. If someone's selected, and they might not even want to be selected, at random and put on behind a computer to represent the people, how are they going to represent me? How it's just, to me, it's dangerous. I don't want this. And it's coming from the World Economic Forum. These people aren't interested in democracy. They've just put us into lockdown for 2 years, a prison-style lockdown, a martial law. That's what it's been. And we trust these people to bring in a democratic system. No way, Rad, no way. So we've got to make sure we don't let them do this and we don't get fooled, because they're going to fool a lot of people with that, I think. They're going to fool the so-called left, I think, will really like that. Extinction Rebellion are going for it. our job is to make sure we convince people, no, we need to restore representative democracy, start again with it, and make sure it's set up in a way where corporate interests, big moneyed interests, which is what's happened, which is why Bill Gates has so much power, do not come into that system at all. I think that's the kind of discussion that we need to have. But that's just my opinion. Other people might see it in a different way.
That's what we have to do. We have to discuss things, and
Yeah.
every person got a different idea on what the future may look like and what we want to do. So, like, each one of us need to give their 2 pence into the debate.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it's interesting times we're living in, and I hope that we still, as a majority, we can do the transformation our way. I don't think obviously technology is on their side, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that human collective can't wake up and
No.
just come out with I personally expect this situation to evolve into renaissance, new renaissance for humanity, because that's how I felt about this. Like, there was a certain depressing day when we were coming out on the street, and it was all looking like you said, like in dystopian sci-fi movie.
Mm.
But moments like in June, when we're part of like 1.5 million
Yeah.
group, and when you're thinking that just a fraction of what really um, is out there. I mean, people who couldn't make it. So that was just percentage of people who could make it. So I think there is a big potential that can be utilized, and it doesn't take 100%. It never did. We just need 10, maybe 20%
They
of
say 10%.
society.
It's that golden number, don't they? You're right. They say 10% is all you need for an uprising, and I would say we're there, Rad. Actually, we've got the
Yes,
numbers.
yes. So this 10%, because I'm just guessing, like, for you, like, and myself and many others, there's no going back to old way of thinking.
No, no.
I will not be pretending anymore that the old things, all the way of living can be restored. So
Mm.
that's the reason why I'm doing this. For instance, I was doing live streams, but then I'm just stepping up my activism and also media presence, because it's not going anywhere. I mean, it will be. I kept on saying to people, like, communism in Poland, when we were under I would call occupation, under influence of this regime. It lasted from 1945 till 1993, when we had a last Russian troops leaving the country. So that's 48 years, so nearly 5 decades. Just
Yeah.
to give some time perspective, I think now things accelerate because we got this technology, we can connect, and
Yeah. That's
everything goes 5 or 10 times faster. But still,
yeah.
we're talking at least a decade, at least 10 years ahead of us of
Hmm.
an intense change process
Yeah.
before we will start going on the straight line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good way of seeing it in terms of normal processes, how long they take, and then bringing in all these other factors like technology. And also, I don't think it's just the technology, Rad. I think it's also looking at how quickly. I mean, obviously, it's been a long-term process. I know it's been a build-up to totalitarianism, fascism, whatever we want to call it. It's been a build-up for years, but I mean, in the sense of the last 2 years, they've gone at lightning speed, haven't they, to try and which is very odd actually. Why be in such a hurry? Because it'd be more effective, wouldn't
That's
it? If you
yes,
think of it,
that's
if you think about it
I'm
as a strategist, if
yes,
you were one of their people in a room thinking up how do you do this, to me, it would be if you really want it to work, you'd be a lot more stealthy about it. But they haven't. They've been really in our faces. So I think that's actually why the speed that they've gone makes us respond in a much quicker way than we normally would. So I think maybe that's how it's going to happen. Maybe it will just collapse quite quickly. Maybe it won't take as long as apartheid in South Africa, communist the fall of the communist regime. Maybe I hope you're right. I do feel that as well. I think this is going to be It's going to happen quite quickly. Yeah, certainly not decades and decades. But, yeah.
Best way to predict future is to create it. So I know,
Mm.
like now, my priorities change completely from, let's say, different. How to say that? Mm, my personal goals, they change significantly. So now I'm thinking of a future for a next generation. I happen
Yeah.
to be father. I got child, and I'm thinking of the next generation. I just compare myself to what generation of my parents and their parents, grandparents did
Mm.
for me to have
Yeah.
free freedom
Freedom.
of choice.
Yeah.
So now it's on us, and it's on grandparents. So we are
Mhm.
now the parents. So parents generation and grandparents, we need to stand up for next generation.
Yeah.
But I think this is like silver lining of this, that there will be transformation, and transformation is painful, like
Yeah.
dropping the old cocoon and then evolving into
Yeah.
a new form.
Yeah.
So this is birthing process is always painful, but the truth is better to know the worst of truth.
Yeah.
But the truth sets people free. So I hope that we're heading that direction. And another thing is, like, I thought all their technology advancement in military psychology, etc. So many people like yourself, they just stood up against all that odds, like David against Goliath, and just say no.
Yeah.
And I think, for people like yourself, for people like myself, there's no amount of, I mean, the you can't break the human spirit.
No.
You
No.
can break human body, you can break human mind, but not the spirit. So if people understand this in the
Mm.
power, and they will rethink what they want to have as a society, and they will be engaging more consciously, which I think we are now, because that was such a eye-opening experience. And you've mentioned this, and I also keep on saying that all this, I've never seen such friendly and diverse and open environment like those rallies. People are coming with the music. I've been in several countries, they all got like festival sound to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
different sounds, different vibration, but literally strangers are coming and hugging you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never seen anything like this. And um, I this gives me hope for the future.
Mm.
But obviously, we need to admit what is going on. We need to educate people, because we
Mm.
came to all this situation by being misled by media.
Yeah.
I would say media, propaganda, the signage. This will all go under propaganda bracket. Employment of media, of science, of the manipulation,
Mhm.
suppression of the free speech, suppression of the scientific debate. So we need to. Freedom is very expensive. So we need to pay the price to regain this. It's not granted. It needs to
Yeah.
be fought for, like in previous generation. But yes, and then another thing, like reason why I want to speak with people like yourself, because aside of bullying and you being smeared in media, the
Yeah.
very first thing is that you're a mom. You're just a normal person
Yeah.
who decided to say no.
Mhm.
And I've met so many. I call them warrior moms, warrior dads. I've met
Yeah.
grandparents. I've met people who've never been to protest before, and they stood up, and they're coming out every time they can, when they can, because we all got some restriction, but they are consistent, and they are standing up for this. So I think this energy can't be stopped. The manipulation, obviously, we've been lied for so long, and if they would continue at slow pace, we would slowly go in the trap with no escape. I think,
Mm.
because we wouldn't even know where we stepped in.
Hmm.
But like now, their cards are being played in open, like criminalization of protest. We see what they're doing. They just expose themselves to what they're doing. So
Yeah.
my understanding of politicians was always that they were meant to be elected
Yeah.
representative. Like you said, you can go to guy's or gal door and just say, "Hold on a second, yeah, you work for us. We got
Yeah.
this community
Yeah.
interest here. Can't we talk?" And obviously, this is technocratic hijack. But I'm thinking, they just walked up the lions. They woke up people,
Yeah.
and they see what is going on, and
Yeah.
it's just like I said, there's no going back for us.
No, they showed it's an expression. I don't know if you've heard it in our culture. They showed their hand. It's like when you play a game of cards and you show people the cards you've got. They've done that, haven't they? They've showed us. It's like this is what we're doing. There's no kind of shame in it, is there? I mean, there's always been corruption throughout history and evil and control, but it's always been they've always tried to hide it from the people because they know they're going too far. Then, but this has been about saying to us, "This is what we're doing to you." And I think actually that's been the mistake, hasn't it? Is I think a lot of it is an arrogance that they've reached because they've got so much power and they've got so much money that they think, well, we'll just tell them. And also, I think they're laughing at us. They've been blatantly laughing at us for 2 years, not just the parties. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, do you remember the clip on TV of Matt Hancock supposedly crying about? I think it was to do with the guy that got the first medical intervention for the disease.
Yes.
He was called William Shakespeare,
Hmm.
and he was from Stratford upon Avon. And cuts to as an interview, Matt Hancock completely laughing. And one question, he said, "I was crying." And he was laughing. And to me, that was a snapshot right back at the beginning of all this that said to me, this is what they're doing. It's just a big joke to them because they're rubbing it in people's faces and they're laughing at the fact that they think people do not get it. But as we know, a lot of people are getting it. They are aware of what they're doing. So yeah, I mean, when you see it that way, I mean, at times, Rad, in all of this, we can be quite negative and despondent and think, oh, we're up against this huge machine, we've got no hope. But when you look at it like that, in an abstract way, you think, oh my goodness, this is going to fail. It's not going to work. And yeah, you look at it in a historical perspective. It's just not. How can it work? What they're doing? They've gone too far.
They got away with this for too long, I would
Yeah,
say, and now they just really pushed the line too far,
yeah,
and this will be collapsing. I mean, this system can't sustain itself anymore. But then again, nothing will happen over a day. That's why I keep on saying that's where I see like my job, because it will be, like job of our lifetimes, really, becoming when we decided to uh, engage in activism.
yeah,
That becomes a mission. So this will not happen over day, month. It will be a lifetime mission for us now to
yeah,
engage and re-educate people. So
yeah,
that's why, again, uh, mainstream media, they created this illusion. So that's why I want to speak to real people like you, who are the backbone of this, and they are not, aside of being smeared in media, they're not being shown. And that's what I want to say, because people will always resonate with other people. They will see other moms, dads, other people losing businesses, other people who suffer, and
yeah.
there will be connection, and they will join together, because we are not working for division.
No,
We're not divisive.
no,
We fell sometimes for it because there was such a tension. We're just humans, so
yeah,
but we are not divisive, and government is ruling by divide and conquer
yeah,
technique, and they want division between people who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, pro Brexit, pro stay,
mhm,
etc. They were always creating division, and they were always playing this mental game with us to divide us. But then what they failed this time, big style, is that they completely had the opposite, because probably there was never even comparing Brexit debate, there was never so many people coming together, and this will, I think, only gets better over time. We need evolution. We can't fix
Yeah.
the old rotten tree. Yeah, so we need to. There was that saying, I can't remember who said that, but you can't fight the corrupted system. The way to do it is to create better one that
Yeah.
will make the old one obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
And
probably
it's and I think it's like anything that's so corrupt as well, it naturally collapses as well. I mean, it falls in on itself because these people are all so evil and self-interested. They end up fighting, which is what we're already saying. They end up fighting each other, don't they? In
Mhm.
this huge power grab. It's destined to fail. And as you said, we got to focus on what kind of world are we going to build. And on educating our children as well in terms of the kind of people we want to make that new world. Because obviously we're not getting any younger, and our kids are going to be the ones to. That's key as well, isn't it? Is our children make sure our kids have got. And I'm sure yours, with what you do, are very, are learning all these things. I don't know how old your children are, but that they just grow up to not none of this division, none of this fakery and imagery that all children now are learning at school. So yeah, um, that's what we've got to do. I think, yeah,
Great. Thank you for coming today. Um, and I understand you're getting so many requests, and my aim was to not distort the situation. As you know, media, they tend to look for to engage, but in a wrong manner. They just want clicks. They want to
yeah,
create an issue where it isn't there.
absolutely,
Sensational headline,
yeah.
but that's the truth. So
Well, I don't.
uh,
I don't engage with mainstream press, Rad. I don't, despite some of the unfair criticism I've had that I've entertained this. I mean, give you an example. Yesterday, I had journalists. That's not even what they're called. I wouldn't even call them journalists. But I had them outside my door. I didn't answer the door. I've avoided them. I won't speak to them because it's not worth even engaging with them. Everything is distorted. Everything is lied about. So what is the point? And that's what we've all got to do. We've all got to just stop engaging with them, stop reading it, stop watching it, don't talk to them. And then if we all did that, they couldn't do any of this stuff, could they? So I'm talk to people like you, real real journalists, people that just want to look at all the information and give people a chance to explain their perspective. Yeah. I
I've,
think we're
I've
building that. We've got loads of amazing independent journalists now, loads, and it's if it wasn't for them, actually, those of us that are fighting things in the courts, if it wasn't for what they do, we wouldn't have all the evidence of what's happening. So yeah.
this is
Well,
this is
well done
front
for it, isn't it?
this is front line, educating people, fighting with media, fighting in the social media comment box.
Yeah.
That's like a very important part, and talking to everybody, because that's what they want. They want to isolate. I told you, I've never paid attention to politics, but again, I didn't realize how powerful media are, and like I kind of respect it. I was coded that, like, okay, BBC is like the top world standard of balanced journalism, and then I'm w- reading their headline that few hundred anti-vaxxers crashed with the police, and I see 40,000 peaceful people
Yeah.
protesting on Trafalgar Square. It really gets to you. And then, like, just recently, I've been to Devon. There was activists protesting. They came from all over UK, most of them traveling around 5 hours to protest against court decision who has taken away daughter from father. I don't want to go into details of
Oh
that.
yes, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yes, Leona and Billy Peach.
Mm.
Um, and I've seen footage. I wasn't there for a whole day because of a distance. I didn't arrive first thing in the morning, but I've seen footage that people have taken, and there was journalists from Channel 4 who did the interview, and I've seen independent footage. Somebody took it on mobile phone, and then I compared with the final um, article already. It
Yeah.
was just such a horrible distortion
Yeah.
that you would expect this, I don't know, in communistic Russia, North Korea, dictatorship style uh, country.
Yeah.
it's, it's just shocking, but people can't see it, so
They
that's what.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some people hanging on to this, and we've got to. And it's hard sometimes because I know we get angry. There's still a small number, and it's getting smaller and smaller by the day, that are hanging on to this old media narrative of the world. And I think it's all just fear based, because they know if they let go, they've got to let go of everything, and it means they've got to look at everything in their life and change. And for most human beings to confront that truth, it's just so scary, isn't it? We're in a position as human beings, as you said, we've evolved to a point where we're not scared, and we know we just need to go with this and allow it to all collapse. But I think people are scared because I think they know deep down that this means it's going to be the end of everything soon, and the end of their lives as they know it. And they just, it's like a death, isn't it? It's almost like mourning, when you lose somebody. I think
it
that's what people
it is conditioning. We got all those psychological mechanisms like cognitive dissonance. It's much harder for people to admit that they've been fooled than to
yeah.
accept this harsh reality. And
Mhm.
we just been through the fire. Yeah, we had to burn the past assumption behind. And
Mm.
there is even that saying that in 21st century the equivalent of an alphabet is a person who cannot unlearn the conditioning and relearn.
Yeah.
So we need to like change the whole system of the
Yeah.
system that we are conditioned with, and we now have to start thinking for ourselves critically. And obviously, they're demolishing the system, so the game is rigged. They are tilting the table, so we can't influence this. So if they will crash it, they will crash it. But in my opinion, it will not determine the outcome. The people will determine the outcome, like we always did, because we created civilization, countries, culture, etc.
Yeah.
But now, engaging in a more conscious way, uh, we just have a duty to do it.
Mm. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. It's people in the end will, you can take people, there's an old saying as well, I don't know if you've heard this one, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. My mum always used to say that to me, in the sense of what it means. I don't know if you've heard that before, is you can lead people so far, but there's certain things they will not do. And I think that's what's happening now, is they've led people so far, but then there's a point you reach where people,
again, we don't need to convince 100% of people, but then we just have to keep on going. And on this Saturday, there will be worldwide demonstration happening. I'm planning to go to London to cover a London event, and then I will travel straight overnight. I will travel to Brussels because we got major international protests because of European Union capital. They want to vote about mandatory injectables, mandatory treatment to everybody in European Union, and I think this is event worth of covering. And I'm in some sort of shock because I know that there will be no BBC there, there will be no
it won't be reported.
real media players, but there will be people like myself, independent people
Yeah.
scraping money for fuel, using all their resources, going there and just making sure this is covered.
Yeah.
So that's like I spent last couple of days preparing myself for this. The gear, I set up a little fundraiser as well. It's challenging. Sometimes I don't feel like I want to do it, but who else will do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the realization. We have to. Every one of us need to do something. Two pence, two little pence. It's like if you
Absolutely.
can organize something big, or like become one of the head activists like Debbie, go for it. But if you can just talk to neighbor, at least talk to neighbor. Drop the leaflet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
every action and every person matters, and
Yeah.
that's why the whole game It's about human mind, because they want to set impression on people. They want to hypnotize people. Like, there's nothing you can do. I don't agree with that. We can do a lot. And the situation in UK with all this escalation of protests. Look, December last year, just a couple of hundred people in London beaten up by police. This year, 2021, over 100,000 people on the street.
Yeah.
Police completely helpless.
Yeah.
And that's 18th of December, a few days before Christmas, and
Yeah. Yeah.
100,000 people is coming to London to say no.
Yeah.
So we are on the track. We are accelerating.
We haven't gone anywhere, and I don't think we're going to go anywhere. And I mean, I'm going to talk about this. I'm down in Truro in Cornwall on Saturday. I've agreed to go down there and speak, and this is what I'm going to speak about there as well. Is at this point in time when the PSYOP is moving towards moving away from the disease agenda, moving away from medical treatments. That's the focus they're taking anyway. I'm not saying that's necessarily what they're doing. It's almost like a war strategy, isn't it? That's the way I see it. They want to try and make us think it's all over when it isn't, so that we retreat. So it's at this point in time where we really must keep, and I think we must keep going, because it's there's more. We know there's more ahead. They're not going to give up that easily. So, not when they've had 2 years, 2 years of doing this. They're not just going to say, okay, it's all over. So we're not going to buy into their PSYOP. No.
No, but this was waking point. So I think this is the positive side of the tragic story. Obviously, it isn't all. There's so many human tragedies involved in that, but then it wasn't us who chose the fight. They started the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this will be a long process of healing for people, getting over this situation. But then again, this painful experience, it will wake up so many people. So we will be, this is agent of change, so we can live more consciously and more. Don't just follow the conditioning, like, go to work, pay your mortgage, and check out of the planet. We'll just think more of what we really want to do in this life, and that's good side of it. And we don't have to follow what few technocrats are cooking for us. With the agendas, the thing is with agendas that some people got agenda. Everybody got some sort of agenda, and we should have our own agenda.
Yeah.
If we have our own agenda and we're heading towards it, it will be our direction, which will be prime. If we just fall into it, like, I will just get along with this, then we will fall prey of somebody else's agenda. So this is simple choice to be made, and I think what they, in this sense, they made us favor. It's like you said, they showed us their card. They showed who they really are. War criminals like Tony Blair being knighted, and they just literally at every step they just emphasize what they are, what they do.
It's set up to fail, as we just keep reminding ourselves that, it's, and I'm not saying that's deliberate, but they set it up where it's going to fail, and it's we will just keep growing. I really do think we will, and it's our job, as you said, about agents of change, is just to keep pushing that. That is our job, and I'm certainly not going anywhere, no matter how they smear me, lie about me. I keep going, because I've got this, whether you want to call it religious or spiritual, I'd say it's spiritual for me. I've got this inner thing inside me that says you just keep going, because in the end, there's something that tells you in the end you're going to get there, that it's the right thing to do. And we have to, as you said, make sacrifices to do that. I think these things go in cycles for human generations. These things come around again and again, where people have to have these fights. And
exactly the same
fight. So
same struggle repeats from history. People just don't learn from history. That's where the problem is.
And hopefully, we've got huge numbers, as you said. We've got that 10%. So maybe this is the time where we try and break the cycle. and change who we all are as a collective. Yeah,
Definitely. And with the saying like, quitters never win, winners never quit. This is about being truth with yourself and being consistent. So we don't have to forfeit our moral spine and our who we are, our values, to compromise them. So, and we've proved this, and people like yourself who stood up against all the odds and said no, they can't be bullied. We can't be bullied anymore.
no, no,
So no matter what they will throw at us, they
yeah,
wake up the spirit of resistance, spirit of consciousness, and
yeah,
people are strong. They will say no to it. So,
yeah,
and from there, we will build something which is more humane.
yeah,
And look how just to on a finishing note, look how quickly they drop all this "Build Back Better" slogan.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Completely this
new normal, wasn't
completely
it?
disappeared.
They remember at the beginning it was all "this is your new normal." They stopped that as well. So a lot of these slogans have disappeared. Yeah. So yeah, it's
So
not working. No. And I think just a final point really. The other thing I would say is do not, we're talking about the media being a complete theatre and being fake. We must be aware that public opinion that they report back to us is the same. So when they say 70% of people are in favour of lockdown or whatever it is, that is completely fake. You don't listen to any of that. The gauge you should have as an individual on public opinion is when you go out and talk to people. That's always been my measure as a street activist. I've done loads of street activism over the years. Do not listen to that because it's manipulated on purpose to make us think people think a certain way so that they control us. But actually, what I've found throughout all of this is that there's more people out there on the streets that think the way we do than we realise. It's just that we don't hear about it. So always have that in the back of your mind. Go out and talk to people and find out for yourself. Yeah, be a be a citizens journalist like you. Go and talk to people. If you want to document it, that's even better.
and be fearless like Debbie.
Well,
That's another thing.
it's
And
yeah. Well, we've got to be fearless. I mean, what is fear? I mean, fear is actually is just something we construct in ourselves, isn't it? And most of the time, I'm not saying there's not horrible experiences you have. It's the thought itself is worse than actually what you fear. So it's if you see it in that way, it's it's something that you lose. I think that fear, and I think really, if we try and look at it in context of what's the worst that could happen if we get to that stage, as in other countries where they start detaining people and start building camps, which is Australia, isn't it, at the moment? If we do get to that stage, why you've got to lose all your fear now because that could be the fate of your children. And this is the horrible thing to say, but that's what people need to have in their mind all the time. So lose your fears now so that we stop this, because that is what we face if you don't. So that's what you really should fear, is that if you don't face it, that's what's going to happen. And that's what drives me, is just knowing those are the kind of things that could, I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but could happen if we don't all do something. Yeah.
but that was great to bring your story to, like I said, people will resonate with other people. They will find, the traits that, or they will be convinced by your action, where they would be more hesitant to get this from mainstream media or from politicians who completely betrayed people. So that's why it's important. So I would like to thank you for taking time to give
Okay.
us this interview,
Okay.
and
You.
see you out there. See you on the
Yeah.
street.
See you on the next. I won't be in London Saturday, so I won't catch you, unfortunately. But I should catch you perhaps on the next. I'm sure I'll see you.
I'm pretty sure we'll bump on each other
Yeah.
one day.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.